Hi everyone, this is Donna Caldwell with InDesign 1, and we are already at week 5, and this is webcast 1. I'd like to do just a short webcast on the print dialogue from InDesign. And this is basically a little continuation from the end of last week. And I'm going to just use a couple of different files as examples for this. I'm not going to go into all the details of the print dialogue, but just to help configure a couple little things. I have a flyer here, which is an 8.5 by 11 turned sideways. And I see I've got a little typo in here too. And by the way, this is a template that comes free with the with InDesign, and they've stopped putting them out with the application. They used to, when InDesign would install, you would get a folder of templates, and there's several, books and ads and resumes, and they're not great, but they're great starting places if you want something to just start with and give you some ideas. You can get these now. You can download them from InDesign Secrets. Just go to InDesignSecrets.com and you'll see them there. I'm going to also upload links to the blog to help everybody find some of these favorite places. All right, so this is an 8.5 by 11 turned sideways, so it's landscape. And if I go to the File menu and choose Print, or use either Control-P on Windows or Command-P on Mac, I see that I've got a pretty complex dialogue here. It's pretty sophisticated. This will work for both PostScript printers and non-PostScript printers, so that would be like an inkjet printer. And actually PostScript printers can be inkjet printers as well. So let's just say a word here about PostScript. PostScript is a mathematical vector-based printer language, which is also the native engine inside of InDesign, Illustrator, and PDF files. PostScript was created by Adobe, and it's really how Adobe started its company. And there's a real long history of that, and I know I've probably touched on this in several of the previous webcasts, but suffice it to say that you need somehow for that PostScript to be resolved to get a good printing output. So there's a few things you can do. If you own a PostScript printer, which are very expensive, then it understands the PostScript going on in the application, and usually most things print out pretty well. Now if you have an inkjet, your less expensive kind, anywhere from $100 to $300 inkjet, like I'm showing you here an HP PhotoSmart. A lot of these printers today have a simulation software that tries to understand as much of the PostScript as possible. But there are going to be things that aren't going to work as well. And of course, if you're using a black and white printer, I have a LaserJet that I have as well when I have to print out multiple pages of a document format. And LaserJets give me a lot more pages for the price of the toner rather than inkjet little capsule things that you pop into your printer, and anyone who has an inkjet knows what I'm talking about. And we will go through some of the things that will work well and will not work well. So we all know how we got here, using the File menu and going to the Print command. And the printer options that you see from the Adobe dialog, which is what we're looking at now, has several options that we're going to look at. I'm not going to go through all of them because some of these get very complex, and you're better off going into the help if there's something specific you want to talk about. But I want to help us get some of these issues that we've been using in some of the labs taken care of so you guys don't have a problem with it. The General tab over here on the left are the basic print options. Information on how close your printer can output to the edge, and you can do that by going down to the little thumbnail picture, clicking. Now this is your summary, and then you click again, and I see that I have an icon in the bottom left-hand corner which is giving me information about how this is going to be printed. And right now it's telling me that it's not in RGB and it's not in CMYK. When I get to the other example, we'll take a look at this icon in the bottom left-hand corner. But I can see that my printer will print almost right to the edge on the left side, but there's a little bit of white space going across the bottom, the right edge, and the top. And every printer is going to have a little bit different distance from the edge of the paper. It depends on the price of the printer, the quality of the printer, just lots of things. The general options are the ones that we deal with most often. We want to know how many copies. Are we going to print all the pages, or are we going to print a range of pages? How are those page sequences going to go? Maybe we want only the even pages or the odd pages. And you also have the option within InDesign to print master pages, which normally are non-printable. We only see those master page items that appear on document pages. Sometimes people want their non-printing objects printed. I use these sometimes when I am trying to give template instructions and I want my users to see what guides will be on the pages, or you want to make sure that blank pages get printed. But anyway, there's lots of these types of viewing options here that you can go through if you're interested in them. But the main ones are, we're talking about what pages we're going to print and how many copies we want. The setup is the one that's going to be a little bit more helpful for some of the, for instance, that business card that we did earlier this semester. So the setup allows you to center a small document, and that's what I'm thinking of specifically with that business card. You can also shrink or expand that image. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to click one more time to get my thumbnail back, and I'm going to cancel for just a moment. I'm going to switch over to this business card. Again, go to my print dialog, File Print, and I can see in my setup area that the business card by default is going to print. Now it says upper left, but and that's just the way the page is going through. You can see that it's thinking of this as more the top versus the bottom on the right-hand side. But I'd rather not have this business card print on the edge of the page, because since my printer is not going to print all the way to the edge, I'm going to lose the detail going along the top and the left edge of that business card. So I want to go over here and change a couple of these options. It's important that if I want this to print at 100%, I leave this scale 100, 100, which means it's not going to change the size of the image that's going to go on the page. But instead what I want to do is change my page position, and I'm going to just center it both vertically and horizontally, which is what centered by itself means. And notice that the business card popped to the center. If I wanted this business card to be blown up as big as it could be on an 8.5 by 11, which is what my paper size is, then I would click on Scale to Fit. And it would increase the size of that page. When it printed it, it would blow it up. Most of us are going to have printers that are just 8.5 by 11 printers. Those are our less expensive printers. But you can see that we have all kinds of sizes here that we can input if we have a tray that holds that particular type of paper. And if, let's say you have an 11 by 17 printer, lots of people have invested the money so that they have that option. You'll want to change this from letter to 11 by 17 if that's going to be your paper. Your printer will probably pick that up by default if you've created a page that large, but just make sure that you double check that. I don't want this to scale to fit, so I'm going to turn this back to width and height. Now another tab that we have here is Marks and Bleeds, which includes printer marks for professional output. And there are several types of printer marks. We've got crop, bleed, registration, color bars, and page information. The ones that you're going to want to use the most often for a situation like we have here are the crop marks. Crop marks place marks that allow you to align a ruler or a guide where you can use an X-Acto knife or a slider cutter, whatever it may be. But this is how printers, even professional printers, align things in a guillotine that slice off the part of the page that's not part of the document. And these crop marks are what enable you to know exactly where to cut to get the very absolute edge of your image to show and not cut off too much or too little. So I would suggest trying this and printing out a page, seeing how those crop marks work. Put your ruler across, if you're trying to cut it vertically, put them across those two vertical edges. Now when you cut them off, this is one of the problems that we often have. I've cut off the alignment for the other one because it's sticking out on that edge. So what I sometimes do is place my ruler and I cut from one crop mark to the other, turn my page, and then do it again, so that what I end up getting is, at the very end, is I have 4 tiny little corners that are only about a point that are sticking to the 8.5 by 11, and then I just cut those at the very last. And that way I have something to gauge against. But this is all going to make a lot more sense once you print a page with crop marks and you can see it. Now if you've got an 8.5 by 11 and you print crop marks, they're not going to show because they're outside of the 8.5 by 11 page. So to make that work, you would have to go into setup and you would have to scale it down, which means it's not going to be the accurate size. But sometimes I'm just trying to show someone how something will fold. I had a situation recently where I was trying to demonstrate how this particular brochure would fold. And I did not have a big enough printer to print the true size of that brochure. It ended up being an 11 by 17. So I shrunk it to 8.5 by 11. And then I folded it up. Now it was really teeny compared to the original, but the client got the idea of how this was going to fold. All right, if you have an inkjet printer that is not a PostScript printer, I want to go over one more option here, which is the advanced. There is this command, print as bitmap. This is not available if you have a PostScript printer because it doesn't require it. But in my case, I don't have a PostScript printer. And if I click print as bitmap, I can then choose what resolution I want my printer to try and print this at. And it will help with things like gradations, anything that had some kind of a transparency, anything that's very complex that has special effects. That's really the category that we're looking at there. And you will get sometimes a much better result from your printer because your printer will be able to print it, since the PostScript will kind of be removed from the equation. One other thing I'd like to suggest too, if you do not have a PostScript printer, one of the things I do is I first convert it to a high resolution PDF. When you print to PDF or you save to PDF or export to PDF, you remove PostScript from the equation. The process that takes a document from its source file to the PDF removes the PostScript. And now it's still underlined in that PDF, but now you will get exactly, well, as close to exact as a high printer would see when you put that out on your machine. So try that. If you ever have problems printing an InDesign file directly from InDesign, just convert it to a PDF and try to print it, and I will guarantee that in most cases you're going to get a much better result. There might be times where you need to specify for your printer the type of paper that this is going to be printed on. And we all know that depending on the paper, sometimes the printer will put less ink or more ink. For example, glossy paper sometimes takes less ink, and if you put too much ink on, if the printer puts too much ink on, it'll smear it. So we have this button down here, and this will be similar on the Mac as well. It may not say Setup, it may say something like Properties, but it's going to be a button that takes you directly to your print driver settings. And when you click on this, InDesign's going to balk at that. You'll see it, you get a warning that says, if the desired print setting is available in InDesign's print dialog box, please set it there to avoid printer conflict. So it's telling you, don't go here. I'd rather not. I'd rather see you do everything you need to do in InDesign's print dialog box. But you know, sometimes we can't avoid that. So I go ahead and I click OK, and then you're going to have to go in one more level. And in this case, it's going to say something like properties or preferences again. You have to be sure that you have that particular printer selected that you're going to use. And now what I should see are those options. Oh, and of course, because now it's going out to the Finder, you're not seeing that. Hang on. Let me go back here just a second. I didn't think that was going to be a problem. But let me reshare now. And I will do my desktop. Hang on. All right, I see that that's coming up on my second monitor. So these features are specific to my inkjet printer. So everybody's dialog, once we get to this level, is going to be slightly different depending on whether you have an Epson or an HP, or you're printing on a less expensive or more expensive. But this is where now I can go in and say I want to change my print quality, I want to change the paper type, and there are just a lot of other options that you're going to want to set if you're not getting what you need from the InDesign dialog. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. What's kind of interesting here is even when I click this button, the only way really out of here, if you want to accept the change you made in that preferences dialog, is to click print, though it's not going to initiate the printing. You're still going to be taken back to the InDesign print dialog, and then you'll just go ahead and print from here. All right. One last thing. Under color management, we went over in an earlier webcast the fact that different RGB devices interpret color differently. So in order to try and get your color that you've set up in your InDesign file consistent with your printout, you're going to need to either have InDesign handle that color management portion, or you're going to want your printer to handle it. But if both try to get involved in that interpretation, then you're going to run into some conflicts. So in this case, I'm going into my color management options and saying under color handling, I want to let InDesign determine the colors. Now what you may have to do is go into your control panel and go to your printer, and you may have to turn off color management if you find that your colors are drastically changing. It may be that both the printer and InDesign are both trying to control that color. And you're going to be telling the document that it's going to follow a particular profile. And in this case, it's an sRGB, which is pretty much one of the defaults for anything that I'm doing in RGB. It's just a driver that will automatically load for this. Printing is not an easy thing when you are trying to get some really sophisticated photos out. But I don't want to give you too much detail right now because it'll scare you away from just even trying to print the simplest of things. As you become more adept at wanting to print things, and that's going to be pushed by whether you started to become a photographer and want to share your pictures, or you're going to start actually doing work, or you are doing work in InDesign at your workplace. As you deal with these challenges, you're going to get better at knowing what printer you're supposed to print from, what are going to be the details. So at that point, just look into your documentation for your printer. If you're working at a workplace, you might even have an IT person who's helping with that type of thing. But again, I don't want to give too much detail because it's going to be slightly different for every printer that you print on. All right, that's it for printing. And everybody, I'd really like you to, if you have a printer, you have access to a printer, please just try some of these options. And if you don't want to use too much ink, just create an InDesign file that uses very light colors and that doesn't have a lot of ink. Maybe you even create some small page size that has some circles on it, because I know ink is extremely expensive and we don't want to waste it. And if you have any questions, again, just let me know through either email or the blog. All right, until next time, signing off.